On Christmas Eve 1971, in the bustling Jorge Chavez International Airport in Lima, Peru, 17-year-old Juliane Koepcke boarded LANSA Flight 508 with a mix of excitement and teenage restlessness. Born in 1954 to German immigrant scientists, her father, Hans Wilhelm Koepcke, a pioneering zoologist, and her mother, Maria, an esteemed ornithologist, Juliane had spent much of her childhood immersed in the wilds of the Peruvian Amazon. The family had settled in the rainforest town of Pucallpa, where Hans ran a biological research station deep in the jungle, studying everything from insects to indigenous flora. Juliane's early years were a blend of rigorous German schooling and hands-on jungle education. Her parents taught her to identify edible plants, navigate by stars and streams, and respect the rainforest's deadly denizens, from venomous fer-de-lance snakes to flesh-eating piranhas. By the time she graduated from the German-Peruvian Alexander von Humboldt High School in Lima just weeks earlier, she dreamed of following in their footsteps, perhaps studying biology herself. This trip was meant to be a joyful reunion. Juliane and her mother, clutching small gifts wrapped in festive paper, were flying to Pucallpa for a belated Christmas with Hans, who was awaiting them with a simple feast of river fish and fresh fruits amid the humid green expanse. The Lockheed L-188A Electra turboprop, an aging workhorse with a spotty maintenance history, LANSA Airlines was notorious for its poor safety record, having lost multiple planes in recent years, lifted off around 12:36 p.m. under a deceptively clear sky. The flight path would take them eastward over the jagged Andes Mountains and into the heart of the Amazon basin, a 2-hour hop that felt like a bridge between Juliane's urban school life and her wild roots. Seated in row 19 near the rear, mother and daughter chatted lightly, Maria perhaps sharing stories of rare birds she'd spotted on recent field trips, while Juliane fidgeted with her seatbelt, dressed lightly for Peru's summer heat in a short-sleeved mini-dress, nylon stockings and simple sandals, one of which would soon become her only footwear. The cabin hummed with holiday chatter from the 86 passengers and 6 crew members, many families like theirs, bound for festive gatherings. But as the plane climbed to its cruising altitude of about 21,000 feet and veered into the vast Peruvian rainforest, the mood shifted. Ominous weather reports crackled over the radio. Severe thunderstorms were building over the jungle, but the pilots, under pressure to maintain schedules, pushed onward. By mid-afternoon, the Electra plunged into a roiling wall of cumulonimbus clouds, where rain hammered the fuselage like gunfire and lightning forked through the darkness like vengeful veins. In an instant that Juliane would later describe as a deafening roar, followed by surreal silence, catastrophe unfolded. At approximately 3:35 p.m., a brilliant bolt of lightning, common in the Amazon's volatile atmosphere, struck the right wing directly over the fuel tank, igniting a chain of explosions that tore the aircraft apart like wet paper. The plane disintegrated mid-air in a vortex of fire, shrapnel, and screams, scattering seats, luggage, and bodies across 3 miles of sky. Juliane, still buckled into her row's 3-seat section next to her mother, felt the world invert as their chunk of fuselage was ejected into the storm. For what felt like an eternity but was mere seconds, she free fell over 10,000 feet, nearly 2 miles, through whipping winds and slashing rain, the seat cushioning her like an improvised parachute. Branches of the ancient kapok and cecropia trees clawed at her as she plummeted through the rainforest's multi-layered canopy, a vast, leafy trampoline that slowed her descent with thousands of snaps and tears. She crashed to the forest floor in a tangle of vines and mud, the seat wedged upright against a massive trunk, her body slamming with bone-jarring force. Dazed and concussed, Juliane blacked out briefly, only to awaken to a cacophony of distant cries, perhaps other survivors, and the metallic tang of blood in her mouth. When consciousness fully returned hours later, as twilight filtered dimly through the impenetrable green roof above, Juliane assessed her ravaged form amid the wreckage strewn like confetti across the understory. Her right collarbone was fractured, sending lances of pain with every breath. A 3-inch gash on her right arm oozed from a flying metal fragment, already swelling in the humid 90-degree Fahrenheit air. Her right eye was nearly swollen shut from bruising, and her vision blurred without her shattered glasses. Cuts lacerated her legs and torso, one knee gashed deeply enough to expose bone, and her ribs ached from the impact. She was soaked to the skin, her mini-dress shredded into rags, one stocking torn away, and only her left sandal intact, The right had vanished in the fall. In her lap lay the small sack of boiled sweets her mother had packed as a treat, now her sole provision. Stumbling through the dimness, she called out, "Mother! Mother!" Her voice hoarse and echoing off the boles of towering trees. She found scattered seats entangled in lianas, some with passengers still harnessed, their eyes vacant and limbs twisted unnaturally. Heart-shattering, she located her mother's seat nearby, but Maria was gone. Her body vanished into the foliage, killed instantly by the blast or the fall. Juliane, in profound shock, wept briefly before survival instinct overrode grief. At 17, she was the lone sentinel in this verdant mausoleum, where 91 others had perished in one of aviation's cruelest ironies. Drawing on the indelible lessons from her jungle-raised youth, Juliane steeled herself against the encroaching panic. Her father's mantra echoed, "In the rainforest, water is your compass. Follow streams downhill to rivers, and rivers lead to humanity." Spotting a narrow rivulet snaking through the leaf litter, she fashioned a makeshift sling from her seatbelt for her throbbing arm and began her odyssey, wading into the ankle-deep current to evade the forest floor's hazards. Razor-sharp bromeliads, swarms of bullet ants, and the slither of potential coral snakes. The first day blurred into a feverish haze from her concussion, each step splashing mud and igniting pain. But she rationed 3 candies, their sugary solace a fleeting bulwark against gnawing hunger. Nights descended like velvet curtains, the jungle alive with the guttural howls of spider monkeys, the rustle of jaguars on the prowl, and the relentless drone of mosquitoes feasting on her exposed skin. Huddled against a buttress root, she shivered through drenching downpours, hallucinations flickering at the edges of her vision. Ghostly faces in the shadows, whispers of her mother's voice urging her onward. By day 2, dehydration clawed at her throat, and she slurped greedily from the stream, filtering it through her teeth against the silt and unseen parasites. Her arm wound festered rapidly in the tropical broth, pus bubbling forth as flies laid eggs in the necrotic flesh. Within days, hundreds of maggots would writhe within, a living torment she could only paw at futilely, lacking tools to excise them. Food became a desperate improvisation. Spotting wild bananas and guavas dangling just out of reach, she stretched on tiptoe, devouring the tart fruits warily. Her mother's encyclopedic knowledge of toxic lianas and milky-sapped plants spared her from poisoning. When ripe pickings thinned, starvation forced bolder risks. She plucked fat palm grubs from rotting logs, their creamy innards sliding down like regret, and once gagged down a raw frog snatched from the shallows, its slimy bulk a revulsion she swallowed for strength. The river widened into the Tambopata's tributary, its waters teeming with caimans and stingrays that she skirted by clinging to overhanging branches. Overhead, the thrum of Peruvian Air Force search planes taunted her thrice. Once so close she screamed and waved her good arm until hoarse. But the 150-foot canopy devoured her signals, leaving her a phantom in the emerald abyss. Exhaustion mounted, her bare right foot blistered on submerged rocks, her body thinned to sinew and shadow, fever spiking from infection into delirious dreams of home, Christmas trees twinkling in Pucallpa, her father's gentle lectures on biodiversity. For 11 unrelenting days, January 1st through 3, 1972, Juliane pressed on, covering nearly 60 miles in a slow, deliberate crawl against the current's deceptive meanders. Her pace conserved scant energy. Mornings for foraging, afternoons for waiting when the sun pierced the gloom, evenings for collapse under fern fronds. The psychological toll was as brutal as the physical. Waves of despair crashed over her, visions of her mother's final smile mingling with the buzz of corpse flies from distant wreckage. Yet resilience, forged in childhood treks with her parents, anchored her, reminders that the Amazon, for all its ferocity, was also a web of life sustaining the prepared. On the 11th dawn, her strength ebbing to whispers, she staggered onto a sandy bank near a cluster of felled mahogany logs, the acrid scent of chainsaws a human herald. Collapsing beside a crude lean-to shelter built by lenadors, local lumberjacks harvesting timber for export, she lay immobile, a spectral figure in tattered white, her porcelain skin smeared with ochre clay and blood, hair a snarled crown of leaves and twigs. Hours later, 3 men in a dugout canoe, indigenous workers from the nearby Shipibo-Conibo communities, rounded a bend and froze at the apparition. In their lore, such ragged wraiths evoked the Chilachaqui, forest tricksters who lured the unwary astray. They paddled hesitantly, machetes at the ready, murmuring prayers to the river spirits. But as Juliane stirred, murmuring, "Ayuda, help," in broken Spanish laced with German, humanity dawned on them. They beached the canoe and approached gingerly, offering sips from a gourd of stream water laced with electrolytes from boiled manioc leaves. With calloused hands, they rinsed her suppurating wounds using river water and rock salt, the sting drawing guttural moans from her parched lips, then fed her bites of roasted yucca and plantains to steady her trembling frame. Wrapping her in a rough poncho against the evening chill, they poled her downstream 10 miles to the missionary outpost at Tornavista, a ramshackle village of thatched huts and evangelical hymns. There, a kindly priest radioed for aid, and by nightfall, a bush pilot in a battered Cessna whisked her over the canopy to Pucallpa's missionary hospital. The jolting 30-minute flight a blur of pain and propulsion. As medics wheeled her gurney through the clinic's swinging doors on January 4th, Hans Wilhelm Koepcke, who had spent the agonizing 10 days since the crash scouring newspapers and pleading with authorities for news, burst from a waiting room, his face crumpling in disbelief and rapture. "Mein Mädchen," he sobbed, cradling her skeletal form, their reunion a raw tableau of paternal devotion amid the beeps of IV drips and the scent of antiseptic. Doctors, awestruck by her vitality, marveled at the litany of traumas. They surgically debrided her arm, extracting over 30 wriggling maggots and fly larvae in a procedure that left her screaming. Antibiotics stemmed the sepsis threatening her life. Fractures were cast, and fluids restored her to a fragile lucidity. Even in recovery, Juliane's scientific mind shone. Sketching crude maps from concussion-fogged memory, she guided helicopters back to the crash site, enabling the recovery of 14 partial remains, including fragments confirming Maria's death, for dignified repatriation to Germany. The toll was 91 lives lost, a grim ledger of an airline's hubris in stormy skies. Juliane Koepcke's saga, dubbed the Miracle in the Jungle by awed headlines worldwide, transcended mere survival to embody the indomitable human spirit. From a 10,000-foot plunge through lightning-lashed chaos to an 11-day gauntlet of starvation, infestation, and isolation in the world's densest wilderness, she emerged not with superhuman feats, but with the quiet arsenal of preparation. Her parents' lore on riverine navigation, cautious foraging, and mental fortitude. The trauma lingered, nightmares of falling, a profound grief for Maria that shadowed her for decades, but it forged her path. Returning to Germany, Juliane earned a PhD in mammalogy from the University of Kiel, dedicating her career to conserving the very Amazon that tested her, authoring papers on bat ecology and, in 2011, her memoir When I Fell from the Sky, a poignant chronicle of loss and rebirth. Today, at 71, she advocates for rainforest preservation, her story a clarion call. In nature's crucible, knowledge and will are the truest lifelines. What strikes you most about Juliane's unyielding journey? Share your reflections below. It's tales like hers that remind us of our hidden reserves. If this account moved you, pass it along to inspire another, and stay tuned for more stories of extraordinary endurance. Thanks for joining the adventure.